Hello, my name is Kira, and today I'm going to be talking about Chapter 21, Periodization, specifically back about our volleyball player. She is 20 years old, she is a collegiate volleyball player, and we're going to be talking about what she would be training in her preseason, in-season, and postseason. We're going to be splitting it up, and we're going to be talking about it. So first we have our seasons of when she's competing, when she's not competing. So first we have our off season, we have our preseason, we have our in season, and then we have our post season. So if she starts her competitions in August and ends them in December, then that means she's in season from August to December. After December, she'll be in postseason. So this will be her active rest. That's her phase. So after December, she'll be in her active rest. That will last only for so long, and then she'll get into her specifically off season. So off season is when training begins again for hypertrophy and strength endurance. So that's when they start picking their training back up. They may be in postseason for maybe a month or 2 months, and then they jump right back into off season where they begin their training all over again. After their off season, they get into their preseason, which trains their basic strength, and then they jump into their strength and power, and there's a transition period between that. During those, they're going to be doing very high basic strength, but low to very high strength and power, depending on what they're doing and where they're at in their training. In season, they're going to be peaking and at maintenance. So peaking is their very high to very low intensity, and they're doing moderate to high maintenance. So in peaking or in season or maintenance training, they're going to be training high volume. They're going to be training with a lot of weight, but they're not going to be doing a lot of reps. And they're going to lift less. What they're going to be doing a lot of the time is training sport specific movement, and they're going to be doing strategies. They're going to be doing specific movements. During the postseason, they're going to be coming down from that, so they're going to be doing recreational activities. They don't really need to have sport specific movements. This is just coming down from that season and letting their body recuperate in that way. Still staying active, but they're not doing anything that's high intensity for them. So it doesn't take a lot. In the off season, that's when they get their low to moderate and they start building back up from that post-season rest. So off season, they have high volume and they do 3 to 6 sets of 8 to 20 repetitions. And they're going to train specifically for hypertrophy and strength endurance. When they transition in, so there's transitional period, their first transition from their off season to preseason, and they're going to be doing basic strength in both. So basic strength, they're going to be doing high intensity and moderate to high volume, and they're going to do 2 to 6 sets of 2 to 6 repetitions. So we're taking down those repetitions, we're taking down those sets, and they're just building up on that volume. So volume's going to increase here. In the preseason, they're training also strength and power. So that's more towards when they approach the competition time. So for them, this would be anywhere between, say, April to the beginning of August. That's when they would start training for that. They would start in those few months really getting that up and ready. Well, it's a few months before, so probably at the beginning of summer. So May to August. April, they're probably still in that off season. When they're training that strength and power, they're going to have low volume, but their intensity is going to be low to high. So it could be anywhere in there because they're training that power. So lower loads, but with more explosiveness is what they're aiming for. In season, when they're peaking, they're going to have very low volume, but very low to high intensity. So they're going to be doing 1 to 3 sets of 1 to 3 repetitions. Unlike in the strength and power, they're going to be doing 2 to 5 sets with 2 to 5 repetitions. Okay? So whenever they're in their season, they're going to be training their hypertrophy, basic strength, hypertrophy, basic strength, and that's in their off season. And then they get a period of active rest. So that's when they're going to be resting, but they're going to be also still training, sport specifically. In their preseason, they're going to be doing strength and power, basic strength, and then strength and power. And that's going to be their microcycle within there. And that's when they're going to be switching between those. A mesocycle is from 2 to 6 weeks, and a microcycle is several days to 2 weeks. There are also macrocycles. They're several months to a year. So your macrocycle would probably more encompass the longer periods. And they also have just smaller ones, training day, training session. And then they have the longer ones, multi-year plan. This is probably for the collegiate ones when they're going to ramp up the intensity every year from freshman to senior because they're in that training and they're actively going stronger every single year. For the volleyball player, they're going to be they're going to have multiple mesocycles. So if we're starting at the August, they're in season, they're going to have their first mesocycle, which will be 4 weeks, and it'll run from that period in August probably into the September. What they're going to be doing is they're going to be at a 75% of their load, and within the microcycles, they're going to ramp up non-linearly. They're going to ramp up that difficulty by 5% of they're up their load by 5% every week. But on that last week, so they have a 4-week mesocycle. On their 5th week, right outside of that mesocycle, they're going to have what's called a deloading, and that's going to help them basically recover, and then they jump right back in to that training. So they start their next mesocycle, but this time, instead of starting with 75%, they're going to start with 70%. Now, all of this, they're only going to be doing one set with only a few repetitions. So like if they were to do hang cleans, they're only going to do 3 reps, while front squats they could do 5, or lying triceps they could do 10. And they're going to have plenty of rest, and they're going to be lifting heavy, but they're going to be getting a lot of that rest and building that strength, and they're going to be building that power, because what they're looking to develop right now is they're just trying to keep in shape. They're trying to keep that strength while they're in their season. With those 3 mesocycles in their competition, they're going to actually decrease their load as the weeks go by. Now, at the end of every 4 weeks, that 5th week, they're going to have that deload week. But when you start over the mesocycle, they're actually going to decrease the beginning loads. So in the first one, they started with 75%. Now they're going to be starting with 70, 65, and they're just going to slowly decrease it because they need to practice more sport specific things rather than focus on just that strength or power. When they have their tournament, so their games and their actual within that competition, they're going to have, if it's split up into days, they're going to have their practices. If they have 2, they're going to have 1 day with resistance training, and then they're going to have another practice day without it. They're going to have their practice with now instead a plyometric session. Then they're going to have their game. So they built that power and that practicing, and then they're going to jump into the game. And then after that, they're going to practice with some interval sprints perhaps, and then they might have another game. And then let's say there's another week of tournaments. They're going to have a game, practice, or rest because they've already played a lot of games. This is their 2nd week. Then they're going to practice with some resistance training. Then they're going to just practice. Then they're going to have a game. And then they're going to practice with more interval sprints and have another game. There's a lot of rest in there, which is why they're okay practicing as much as they are. So now let's say they're into their off season. Their off season is going to last about 3.5 months as compared to competition, which lasts about 5. This one is also going to have 3 mesocycles, and then this one, because they're in their off season, they're going to be doing not as much heavy as they are focusing on strength, endurance, and hypertrophy. So they're going to be working on building that muscle size, and they're going to be working on making sure the muscles can work long term for long periods of time. So they're going to do, instead of the 1 sets and minimal reps they did before, they're going to do multiple sets, so like 2 or 3, and they're going to do about 10 reps or more. And they're going to be working at about anywhere from, say, 60 to 75% of their overall load in that first mesocycle. Then they're going to ramp it up. These mesocycles are only going to be by 2 weeks, so they don't need a deloading. They're actually going to build as it goes. So within the second mesocycle, they're going to decrease the amount of reps, but they're going to increase the intensity, so the amount of weight they're putting on themselves. So instead of the 10 reps, they're going to do 3 sets of 5 reps, and they're going to increase that load from a 65% to an 80%, a large increase, but they're trying to build that muscle as they go on. Of course, at the end of that time, they're going to have unloading, so when they drop down and let themselves recuperate and rest. So now we're approaching the preseason, and they're building that basic strength, and they're still working on that hypertrophy only a little bit, but they're still building on that basic strength now. So they're going to do 3 sets of 10 reps for these ones, and they're going to be working at less of an intensity. So instead of that 80% as before, they're going to drop down to about a 70 at most, and they're going to keep working with those high sets, high reps. On the last mesocycle, so the last 2 weeks, they're going to be doing 4 sets of 5 reps, but they're going to bump back up to that 80%. So they're really drilling that basic strength. That way, because right now they're in their preseason, so then they're going to be able to jump into their in-season. But this is still that preseason and before they jump into the competitions. And then they're also going to have, still after that 4th mesocycle, they're going to have that last unloading week. That way they can drop back down instead of 4, they're going to have 4 sets with 5 reps, and they're going to do at most 70%. Okay? Now they get their 5th mesocycle. So now there's a 5th mesocycle, and this is still that preseason. So this is right before they're getting into it. This is going to be 2 weeks, and they're working strength and power. So like I said, they're getting into that preseason where they're building a lot of strength and power. So here they're going to do 4 sets of 3 reps, and they're going to be working anywhere from the 70 range to almost their maximum. So like 90, 95%. They're going to be working a lot of weight, and they're going to be working a lot of strength and power. Of course, after those 2 weeks of heavy lifting, they're going to have an unloading week right before they jump back into their season. And that's how they're going to run their mesocycles, and that's how they're going to write out the workouts for them to maximize on their strength and power during their in-season. During the postseason, they get to unload and have those recreational activities and not sport-specific. During the off-season, they're going to not be working as much sport-specific, and they're going to just be working hypertrophy and basic strength, or strength endurance. So they're going to be working a lot of that, a lot of reps, a lot of sets, less intensity. During the preseason is when they start getting into the strength and power and basic strength, of course, because basic strength is that transition period between the two. And right before they jump into the in-season, they're going to have their second transitional period where they stop doing as much basic strength, and they're just doing strength and power. And then they're in that period where they're just maintaining that strength and building it as they're peaking in that in-season. So thank you very much. That is me talking about our volleyball player and going through the season. And thank you. That is chapter 21, periodization.